Hi there. Welcome to part 2 of number 9. And I can probably take those headphones off. Mr. Sculthorpe always has interesting things to observe, and here's another one. My guide advised me through a medium not to try astral travelling on my own, that is, without the cooperation of my spirit friends. This advice is well founded. Several times I fully expected a projection, having sensed the signs of preparation, and then the idea would be abandoned. Well, that's his experience, not really mine, but and I also find that guides are almost always there, especially when you're starting out. That sometimes they hang out in the background and will only help if asked. And sometimes they see a problem coming and will intervene. But they always seem to be around, at least one, if not more. On one occasion I reached a state of projection, but when my spirit body was detached there seemed to be some lingering doubt about it, and I drifted through my bedroom door. Then I went downstairs into my shop and stood behind the counter. The vibrations were low and miserable, and the conditions like twilight. I had not had this experience before, and I wondered if I had spoilt the process. Suddenly I seemed to be struck by a whole host of vicious and vengeful thoughts. The effect of these cannot be described in words, as they can only be felt in their fullness by the spirit body, but they were sickening and searing. I sensed the direction of their source and saw a group of people standing about 20 yards away in a lurid and dirty orange glow. Lurid, that's a good descriptor, I'll tell you. Some had sneering grins on their faces, others absolute downright hate, and when they knew I had seen them, they altered their line of thought. I saw skulls, mouldering bundles of bones and graves, all mixed up with the thoughts of ghosts, ghouls, vampires, and all things connected with the earthly ignorance and fiction of the unknown. Being a part-time wraith myself, I thought all this was just ridiculous, and at once the thoughts stopped as if a tap had been turned off, and the group disappeared. I stopped by the counter a little longer, and did not like the hatred in the thought I had received, and went back to my physical body. Back in bed I sensed that these vengeful ones were the rebels or gangsters of spirit. They knew where they were and had been there for ages, and would probably continue until the futility of their state dawned upon them. It would be particularly hard for a member of a group like this to progress individually, as the hatred of the rest would be powerful. That is tribal consciousness. Small tribe, but still a tribe. And as you notice in this world, when you ditch a belief system of one kind or another, a limiting belief system, whether it's political or religious or cultural, the group will try to shame you and draw you back in. Such is tribal consciousness. They think the strength of the group is based on numbers. I was rather struck by the old-fashioned ideas of hauntings that this group directed toward me. They seemed to be well rehearsed and included all the popular ideas that ignorant earthwriters had used for generations when writing ghost stories. Ignorant ideas passed down for ages can become ingrained in people's minds, and the fear of the unknown is not the least of them. Choosing darkness and a suitable place on earth, a group of low spirits like this could affect a person with latent psychic powers, as their combined thoughts are very strong, and all the best haunting effects can be used. This, together with the person's ingrained fear, would result in cold, stark terror that is said to be experienced. The gang was only one of the minor ones that are in the lower astral planes, and there are others with much more powerful methods of attack. Waldo Vieira has an interesting out-of-body experience with such a group. We'll get to that another time. Soon after my spirit helpers had warned me against trying astral travel unaccompanied, I was surrounded by such a group whose thoughts were able to benumb my spirit body as if by an electric current, and I was helpless until my helpers intervened. I thought that some of my attackers were boys until I noticed their faces and saw that they were shriveled men. Some stunted spirit bodies are the result of the low mentality. Yeah, stunted spirit bodies. You'll see them. The chief one was of normal size with a long purplish face and deep cracks in it. Another spirit effect. And I had the impression that he was a businessman during Earth life. I was suddenly plucked from the middle of this gang as if by a gigantic hand, and as I left them I was beset by the whole crowd. A struggling mass, we moved quickly, and my numbness gone, I am afraid that I became rather vicious, for as an arm wrapped itself around my fist, I bit it rather hard. It was like biting rubber. Yeah, if you fighting fire with fire, low spirits, you gotta kick ass. Yeah, if you're starting out, your guides won't lead you to that. That's a toughie. But if you come to it, get ready. This struggling bunch, with myself in the middle, was traveling like a ball on an elastic cord when we hit my physical body, and there was a flash of an electrical explosion, and I saw them flung in all directions as if from a shell burst. I was frightened but relieved, and had the impression that my life force was strengthened by the sudden reuniting of my two bodies, and formed a better protective or repellent zone around me. My thoughts in this experience were interrupted by a movement on the ceiling, which took the form of a huge bronze shield looking immensely strong and solid. This symbol in this particular instance was just as welcome as the beautiful ones were in theirs. This was just one more of my spirit lessons. There were many. These low entities are very powerful when working in a group on their own wavelength, and have learnt many things. When I was plucked from their midst, it seemed instantaneous, yet they were able to project themselves and hang on to me. No doubt my anger and fighting-mad frame of mind caused my astral cord to pull me back to my physical body at a tremendous speed. The phenomenon of the electrical flash or explosion was curious, and may have been caused by the entities coming in sudden contact with a higher potential, which would cause their natural rebound. He talks a little bit about spirit boundaries, where one level kind of morphs into another. A couple of examples. In the first case, which was about 1938, I'd been taken to an airfield in spirit. The airmen were the usual type of young servicemen and full of fun. They were teasing a young pilot who was determined to fly over a nearby range of mountains. Apparently the others had tried it and failed. He entered a plane and flew off, and we watched him steadily climb the steep side of the mountain, but just before reaching the top he lost speed and had to turn. He tried it again and again, but had to return and endure more laughter from his companions. I expected the planes. They did not appear to be etheric replicas of earthly planes, but spirit-made, as the propellers were not large enough for Earth use. In the second case, I had met a soldier in spirit, someone I knew in the 1914 war, and I had persuaded him to come with me to a much better locality. We had been walking for a while, and the country was improving, when he suddenly broke away and ran back. I ran after him, but he seemed frantic and reached a sort of pit in the ground and jumped in. The hole was about 5 yards across. And one more little thing on deceptive spirits. During my early projections, I was rather impressed by my ability to sense characters, and a lesson duly followed. I had been taken to a rather dull state, and a man passed me a little way off. He had a cheerful grin and waved a greeting to me, and I waved to him, whereupon he came over to me, followed by a woman. He said, "You wanted to see her about something?" I thought for a bit and could not recollect any previous meeting, and so shook my head. But he persisted, and again I tried to pick up some idea of what he meant and of his thoughts, and finally said, "No, I am sorry, I have never seen her before." The man shrugged his shoulders, and the pair went away. I was mystified about this until my spirit helper told me, that the man was a quote-unquote white slaver who on Earth used to live on the immortal earnings of his companion. They were old hands in spirit and had learnt to suppress their thoughts, at least to me, a student of spirit conditions. So yes, the pimp and his pimped out girl. And when I've seen documentaries on this sort of a phenomenon in modern life, the ladies do seem deceived and unaware of their own freedom. Of course, they will say that they get beaten up if they try to leave, and that is undoubtedly true. But when they get to spirit, it's quite possible, they get killed in a shootout, they die, and, this, that, and the other. The woman dies of an overdose, and then the pimp gets shot by another pimp, and then they're both dead. And they find each other, and yada, yada, yada. So, you see how this sort of thing goes on? If you have no or little conception of your own inner strength, and, the usual, low self-esteem thing where you feel that you have to be dependent on others, you will be subjected to this sort of situation. Anyway, as this first video was loading up, I sort of messaged to Spirit and said, well, have you got anything interesting for me? Or words to that effect. And I was told, yes, we do. We have a special occasion. And then I thought, that's interesting. And then I thought, well, that's not very spontaneous. This is all supposed to be spontaneous. But you'll forgive me if this one isn't quite as spontaneous as some of the others. And I was told it was going to be about Princess Diana and Queen Elizabeth in spirit. And then I thought, oh, interesting. And then I thought of Princess Margaret, who, when she was played by Helena Bonham Carter, I saw clips of interviews where people would ask her, how did you get such an accurate portrayal? How did you, feel your way into her character? And she made a jokey remark, as she often does, about, the old-fashioned way, and that turned out to be talking to Princess Margaret through a medium that she knew, and having Princess Margaret comment on a variety of topics, which she then used in her portrayal. So then I realized there was going to be 3 of them there. So, and I can't say that I organized this. I was informed of this. And I think others have been invited to this. Maybe, well, let's go see what happens. Because I'm certainly not that special a retriever or explorer. I do get invited to things like the Kennedy family thing years ago, not because I'm better or special, but because they know I'm going to put it on the internet. And of course I'm not the only one that does that, but still, I think that's the deciding factor. They want the news spread as well as far and wide as can be done. So let's check that out. A sort of comfortable sitting room has been selected for this meeting, and in not a palace exactly, but a very nice astral plane. We'll call it a mini mansion, shall we? And the 3 ladies, Queen Elizabeth, Princess Diana, and Princess Margaret, are seated around, a coffee table with what looks like delicious little snacks and tea, and they're Princess Margaret is I think she's chattering away, telling a story or a joke or something. And I've entered the room, and I'm holding back, waiting to see what's been set up. And just watching them all and enjoying their apparent social harmony. And quite involved in their little story that Margaret seems to be telling, and not in a hurry to be aware of me. So, you know, touches of the old attitude, touches of the you will make you wait for a little bit, but there's still a friendly atmosphere. And after some ripples of, chuckles, shall we say, Margaret looks up and says, "Oh, you're here." And I said, "Yes, I am." And what an interesting setup this is. And Margaret says, "You're not accustomed to such things, such arrangements?" And I said, "Oh, once in a while, not terribly often." And but I'm glad to see you're all, happy together. And Elizabeth says, "Well, I wouldn't quite go that far. We're comfortable together. We have lowered our walls around our castles and are embracing each other in a dignified and sensible fashion." Oh. And she sees me grinning and doesn't exactly grin back, but understands that I think things are different here. And what did I say? What am I saying? I'm not here to take you down a peg or two, I said, but I am fairly, iconoclastic in my approach to hierarchy and privilege. And she says, "Well, what gives you the right to do that?" And I said, "I don't have a right. I've been many souls in many positions in past lives, and understand what it means to be both wealthy and poor and privileged and underprivileged. I get the whole game. And I believe you're just starting to get the whole game. But not to criticize you, I'm here to report on your friendly, interactions here. And you want the world to know?" "Yes, we would like to know." And then Diana chirps in and says, "Yeah, we certainly would like to know. We understand the ripples caused by my independently minded son and his wife. And we want to reassure people that those ripples of dysfunction do not continue or are not continuing here in spirit. We have learned to tolerate each other's ways. The Queen and I are now friends. We are now tolerant of each other. We understand the life paths that we took and why we clashed." She gets up and goes over and gives the seated Elizabeth a polite but meaningful hug around the shoulders. And then bending down as Elizabeth is sitting, looks smiling at me as if I had a camera and was going to take a portrait shot that was going to be, I don't know, the Daily Mail or something. And look, see how friendly we are? And I go, "Thank you, I get the message. And if I had a camera, I would take a shot." And she says, "Okay, we'll take that shot onto the internet so people can imagine it." Now, I should add that Elizabeth is not young, but she's younger than when she passed, that's for sure. She's kind of, middle-aged now. And I think she understands the process of getting younger has been explained to her, but she is still, attached to being reserved and dignified, and although, warm and friendly, and, seeping out of her old role bit by bit. And in doing this, she's replicating what many people do. Many people take quite some, well, we'll say months by our time, if not years, to seep out of their old role and their attachments to whoever and whatever they were, character and personality-wise. So in this, she is no different from many others. And the Margaret character says, I understand you're a medium, Gordon. And I say, yes, I am. And I said, I was amused by Helena Bonham Carter's contact with you through a medium on which she based your character in the show. And she said, oh, that was fun. Helena's such a gas. Did she say gas? I don't know. So how did you like your portrayal by her? And she said, oh, yes, it was very good. And how did you like the actor that played Anthony Armstrong Jones? And she said, oh, wasn't he marvelous? Such a man. And I said, yes, I noticed. I'd seen him in other productions, but I thought he did the artistic sort of class-breaking artist lover very well. And the two actors had a great chemistry. And she said, as did we on Earth. And I said, I guess he's around here. And she said, he is, but he's not here now. And yes, we have been in each other's company since getting here. I know you'd want to know that. I said, okay, I get it, as will everyone else. So you're happy with your spirit life, Margaret? Oh, indeed I am. Oh, indeed I am. It can be quite the party palace, no matter where you go. And I still enjoy that side of life. Well, I look over at Elizabeth and she looks, if not disapproving, then, straining to be neutral and non-judgmental. And I think she's starting to wish that I would politely leave, as she thinks my function has been fulfilled. And I say, I get your thoughts, Elizabeth. In this world, I hear what you're thinking. And she said, yes, it is rather discomforting that this can happen. I'm only getting used to it now. And I said, well, if I may make a suggestion, in your time here, and that will be long, explore your past lives. Just a little hint. And may I mention the Virgin Queen Elizabeth I? Maybe you'd like to think about her a little. And she goes, well, and I've also thought of her Scottish successor, James. And I said, oh, okay, well, I'll leave that to you. You want to examine your bloodline, although I understand you're not exactly the bloodlines. The Tudors and the Stuarts and the Saxe-Coburgs, you're all related, but, different. She says, I see you've familiarized yourself with the history of the royal families. And I said, well, in a discursive, casual way, yes. Anyway, a merely suggestion. And I thank you all for this little invitation and adventure. And it's so pleasing to see you all getting together and being good friends and enjoying each other's company. And I hope you all manage to adjust to your new positions. Looks like Margaret has. And Diana, lovely to see you again. And I know you're in contact with your sons. It's quite obvious. And I don't blame you. They need guidance. Those two little squabbling boys, which I guess they always were. And best wishes on that. And thank you for your contribution. It was appreciated. You and Elizabeth played a very good game, contrasting characters, and it helped various elements of British society to come to its senses and express itself. And in that theatrical demonstration alone, you made a great contribution. Elizabeth, if you hadn't, refused to be public and recognized, the public would not have made its giant display of flowers and forced you into, an action that you're perhaps not comfortable with. But it was a necessary piece of national psychological development. And you played your role well. I congratulate you for that. You did exactly what was needed for the drama to unfold, as did Diana. Maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but you did both very well. You played your parts with passion and aplomb. Elizabeth says, well, I'd rather downplay the passion if you don't mind. But I understand your point and I accept it. You are a most insightful character. And I should have you around more often. And I said, oh, no, you don't. You've got your own spirit guides. You don't need me. I will do what I have been asked to do and put this on the internet. And I wish you all well. And don't forget to enjoy your afterlife. Really, it's lots of fun. And in a slight sort of, well, I don't know, we'll call it mockery of tradition, I walk backwards away from them, smiling, and then disappear through the wall. It's interesting what you can do on the astral plane. I guess I was a slightly higher vibration than the vibration of the house. It was sort of a fancy country home. As I say, not quite a palace, but a mansion. And I don't recognize it. I'm not up on my buildings, but you recognize the type. Anyway, here we are, back again. Wasn't that interesting? My. I keep thinking, to myself, not here at this very second, about various famous composers of the past and what they might be up to these days. And I know from many of them were in the early days of spiritualism, quite a few of them were channeled, particularly Frederick Chopin. And if you go to reference libraries, you'll find these old books where they're channeled. And I had long accepted, the fact of eternal life when I came across that 20 or 30 years ago. But since in my first book, Eternal Life and How to Enjoy It, Henry, my guide, who was sort of guiding me, giving me this guided tour of the afterlife, mentioned seeing and listening to Eric Satie. And later, in my second book, I dredged up the memory and the vision of my place in Focus 27 that Bruce mentioned. Then I found out that I'd created one before I was born, and the annex at the back of the cottage was used for chamber concerts. chamber, usually jazz or classical, but mostly classical. You know, string quartets, piano trios, you know, that sort of thing, recitals. And there was at least one occasion where a string quintet played a fairly new piece by Debussy, you know, written after he passed, sort of thing. And so I was made aware 20 years ago that this was going on, and Astral Gordon was taking an active part in all this sort of thing. But for the benefit of this series, I'd been thinking, you know, what composers, what would they be up to, and would they mind being disturbed? You know, because people that were famous in life, physical life, maybe don't always want to be famous in the afterlife. Some accept it, some latch onto it, some shy away from it and want to lead more of a quiet, not quite a hermit life, but a quiet life in the country where they can, you know, flesh out new music, flesh out a new character for their life, you know, all this sort of a thing. And I do recall once, a few years ago, after I hadn't been doing a lot of projections or meditations for, I don't know, busy at work or something. We'll say about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm retired now, but I was busy working before that. I revisited on the spur of the moment Ray Manzarek of The Doors, who had, after he passed from cancer, had really pushed for a contact, and you can go through my list there and you'll find it from about 10 years ago. And I'd brought Jim Morrison along, who was, you know, quite reluctant and stuff, leading the hermit life. And I just thought I'd drop in and see him years afterwards. And just as a practice run, because I hadn't done one in ages, and thought, can I still do this? So, you know, I come through the wall of his home, but it was the room in which he practices and composes. And he was at a table with a couple of keyboards, but it looked like digital keyboards, but you can imagine how fancy digital keyboards are in the astral plane. They're pretty good here. And he was working at some music sheets, composing, writing in the old way. And he looked up from writing and goes, "Oh, hello, Gord. How you doing?" And I said, "Oh, thanks. Nice to see you, Ray. What are you up to?" And he said, I'm working on a concerto." And I said, "Oh, good for you. Great. Glad to hear it." And he reacted as though I had visited him more than, several times. But wasn't really surprised to see me. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Because I didn't realize I'd been visiting in the interim. But, there you go. A lot of stuff happens in an unconscious fashion that you don't remember. And that one little indicator of him turning, pen in hand, and going, "Oh, hi, Gord, how you doing?" Like it was like, oh my God, not "what are you doing here?" It was like, "Oh, hi, Gord, how you doing?" Too funny, I tell you. Anyway, life goes on, and we'll get to another message fairly soon. Bye-bye.